Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Hire podcast. On Beyond the Hire, we dive into recruiting for the go-to-market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. We are accompanied today by Allison Lopour. I just realized I did not check. Lopour, is that how I pronounce your last name?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. All right. Well, Allison is the Chief People Officer at CollegeWise, where she spent 18 years, that is correct, a full-blown adult, 18 years building people-first cultures in education technology. A first-generation college graduate, she started as a college counselor and grew into strategic HR leadership, guiding distributed teams through unprecedented growth while transitioning to fully remote operations. She used to be SHRM SCP certified and now is a happy SHRM, I'm sure there's a better way to pronounce that, has been. Allison is passionate about creating environments where people can bring their authentic selves to work and thrive during periods of change. Thank you for being here, Allison.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's immediately jump in because that was a lot of acronyms. What does SHRM mean?
So, the Society of Human Resource Management is one of the preeminent certifying bodies for HR people. There are a few other big ones, but when I started doing HR work, SHRM was it. You get your SHRM certification. And because I didn't come up as an HR person, I have taught myself everything that I know. And so the SHRM certification felt like this validation. So I studied, I took the test, I passed. I was so proud, so exciting. And in the last couple of years, SHRM has not been great. I didn't know I was going to talk about this on a podcast. Wow. Catch me getting
Let's start them under the bus immediately.
Right. So SHRM decided to remove equity from their DEI. They broken up DEI and decided all these pieces don't matter. They have most recently platformed a pretty hateful guy as a keynote at their inclusion conference. So they're just doing some things that feel like they're acting in opposition of what is best practice for employees. And if they are the ones certifying the HR and people folks who take care of them, it feels a little crazy that they're also kind of platforming this language. And so I decided I had to have an honest conversation with myself about my imposter syndrome versus my willingness to give SHRM money. And my certificate lapsed in August and I did not renew. It's liberating to not be earning professional development credits to keep it certified. I hope they get it back together, but that is why I'm a happy SHRM has been now.
Okay, big developments. All right, there's a lot to dig in here. I did not know that was so juicy. So one of the reasons we really wanted you on the podcast is because you have a very different background from most of the people we talk to. One of the big differences is that you have been at CollegeWise for 18 years. That is a long time. That is a very, very long time. That is an adult.
It's a whole career, yeah.
Yeah, and that just doesn't happen anymore. Like back in the day, I feel like when our parents were employed, they started working at a company, and the moment they were in with the company, they just assumed they would stay there until the day they retired. And there was an age of retirement, so they could kind of count down the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case anymore. So
right.
I would love to hear from you. How did you end up at CollegeWise? And then let's start with that, and then we can dig into the rest.
Okay, so we have to go back to when I was 18, 17, applying to college. I grew up in Southern California. My mom and I did a road trip up the coast to look at a bunch of colleges. And at the end of the road trip, the last college we stopped at was the University of Redlands. And I was tired and I was 17 and I didn't want to be on the road trip anymore. And I had never heard of this college. So I didn't want to get out of the car. My mom forced me out on the campus tour. And by the time we were 45 minutes in, almost back to the admission office, I was like, leave me here. This is my destiny. This is my life. This is it. I ended up attending Redlands. I was a tour guide as a student there, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved college. I loved all the things that I got to experience. I liked talking about college. I liked talking to high school students about college. And so the tour guide gig was great. And I got free lunch regularly in the cafeteria. So that was also a vibe. But I did that all the way through. And then when I was graduating, I had a degree in English and I loved being a tour guide. And I didn't know there's no career paths for a degree in English and you love being a tour guide because I got a job in college admissions. So there are jobs. So I fell into that though, just because I didn't quite know what to do. And I loved talking about this thing. And I worked there for a couple of years and traveled and recruited students and talked about Redlands and then was just ready for something different. Redlands is a small town. I was 22. I needed to find a husband. Okay, I need a bigger town. We got to mix it up. And so I found a job posting I saw for an education company, and I didn't quite know what CollegeWise did. They were independent consultants, which is something I didn't have a ton of experience with or not a ton of positive experience. But the job posting was so compelling. I was like, whatever you're selling, I'm buying. And so I applied for the job and got hired as a college counselor and started working with students. And when I got there, CollegeWise was like 5 employees. And it felt like the big time. I was like, this is such a cool startup. We're so exciting. And we were so tiny. I counseled students, we met in person, we kept really busy. And then over the next couple years, there was some ownership changes. We had some injection of capital. We opened offices across the country. We started training in a broader and bigger way. We started having to speak to more markets and have a deeper understanding of high schools. And I am a person who likes to talk, shocking. And I think I like to teach and tell people how to do things. And so this job that I really liked, I was able to tell more people how to do it. And that was the like little seed that was training. And we kept growing and I kept taking on more. And then all of a sudden, I know what qualifying life events and payroll taxes are all about. But that is that little college tour guide into college counseling work. But it was just guessing every time, like trying a thing I wasn't sure was going to work.
That's amazing. So for those who don't know, you've kind of explained it, but what does CollegeWise do?
Oh, what a great question. CollegeWise is a national, and I guess we're international, college counseling and college admissions company. So we help families through the admissions process from as early as middle school, picking classes and getting ready for high school, all the way through my seniors right now are filling out applications and writing essays and applying, submitting their college applications. So we've got a team of 80 or so counselors, mostly across the US, who work with families all over, some remote, some in person. Got a team of 40 or 50 tutors who support around test prep and academic tutoring, everything from seventh grade algebra to multivariable calculus. So those little 5 folks now have become this like really powerful, we talk about the hive mind. It used to be that I could walk around the office and talk to everybody and ask questions and know what was going on. And now I get to plug into this much bigger brain. I never worked in admissions at Stanford, but my colleague did. I never worked in admissions at Lafayette, but my colleague did. And so we help kids get through the admissions process with hopefully a little less stress and a little fun.
So I have a 5-year-old, right? Very far away from college applications, but I know nothing about college because I'm not from America. I mean, I know college in Europe, but just not
It's
in,
complicated here. It's really
it's very,
complicated.
very complex. So it's people like us kind of would come to CollegeWise and say, help us out. We don't know what we're doing, or who's your
Yeah.
average ICP?
So I would say there are lots of different families come to us. Sometimes they come to us because they aren't either their first generation family, they don't know the college system in the US, and it is famously very annoying and complicated. So that I think just having like a translator to the process can be really helpful. Sometimes you need niche experience or expertise. My daughter's applying to a modern dance program. My kid wants to study math and I only made it through algebra 2. I need someone else who can advise them. For some families, like life is busy and it's a lot to manage. And so having somebody else to kind of carry the work of the process can be really helpful, like a project manager, because the number of essays, the number of applications have ballooned. And also, I think that our school-based counselors have the toughest job of anybody in that they carry consistently really high caseloads that continue to get higher, and their jobs are college counseling and social emotional support. And when there's a crisis on campus and they're doing class schedule adjustments and they're proctoring AP tests and they wear so many hats. And so for some students, they need more of the college counseling talk. And with school counselors having so much going on, only a portion of their job gets to be college counseling. And so sometimes families go, we want that additional support that is entirely this thing. And it's a really fun way to get to step in with families and help find fun in this because I loved Redlands. Obviously, I would go back in a heartbeat. I'm a little old to go back, but I loved it. But I was not a kid who knew about that. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I didn't apply to the UC school, the University of California system, because I didn't know that there was a specific test you had to take. I didn't know how to read financial aid offers. I didn't know any of this. And there's very little education for families early in the process about this. And so being able to step in and go, hey, I know this is really overwhelming and scary. Let's break it down piece by piece. And this is how we're going to approach it for your kid. I feel the same thing about when I get support in my life around stuff. And so I think to be the cheerleader and the project manager, and then to be able to celebrate and when that kid crushes the ACT or they got into the school they were so excited about, I just got goosebumps a little bit talking about hypothetical kids. But I think that's it's a really unique space to work. And it's really magical to work with 17-year-olds at that moment.
That is, I got them too. I'm like, oh, this is so nice and beautiful. I need to remember for when we're in that age and like comment down and be like, Allison, because I mean, my kid is 5, but I'm sure in 10 years you'll still be there probably.
I probably will. That's true. But it is really stressful, I think, even early, and folks don't know what to do. So we try to put a lot of good information out, preach sanity, and talk to kids. That's it.
That's so nice. So let's jump a little bit into kind of your career before we talk too much about these hypothetical children or my 5-year-old. I feel like I'm putting him on the spot and he has no
We
idea
got
what's
to start
happening.
his college planning. We got to start now.
Oh God, a little early for that. But you kind of say you're an accidental HR lady. You studied English. You liked to giving tour guides, tours. You were a tour guide, and you kind of had the dream job and stuck with it. I think what's really interesting is that the grass is always greener somewhere else, or at least that's how people feel in their careers, and that ends up causing a lot of job hopping. I think a lot of us are guilty of this, right? We're like, we've been at a company for a certain amount of time. They have a sweet gig going, but we're like, well, maybe I could make more somewhere else. Or what about the company culture there? Or my friends all work here. This big name of this big company is coming up. I want to join that company. Who knows? Or unicorn,
Hmm.
yada, yada. You name it. And someone has thought it. It's really hard slash almost impossible for people to actually stick with one gig or stay at the company. And obviously, it's not always their own doing. Very often there are layoffs. And I'm actually curious if that's ever happened at CollegeWise in the same way, it has at a lot of other companies. But there's a lot of layoffs, especially Nikki and I were talking about this recently. She's Gen Z, that there's not as much loyalty to the employer anymore because when they all graduated, they saw layoffs. They saw that people left and right were getting fired. So why would they be loyal to a certain company when the company isn't loyal to them? Long-winded way of saying people are either afraid or they're just not excited enough to stay with one company, whereas you have. And it sounds like you're planning on staying with the company for a lot more
Yeah.
years. How would you explain that you did make the decision to stay, and what would your advice be to other people?
Yeah. I think I do feel a little bit like a weirdo having been at my role for so long. And my peers who have had very different paths. And so I think sometimes it's cool. It's like cool to be a unicorn. And I go, wait, what was that? Did you guys get instructions I didn't get? But I think what has happened, I've had some really great mentors, of course, along the way. I like ask myself the question comes up, and I think that the math is always a combination of, am I learning and growing? Am I surrounded by people that I feel good about working with? Do I feel good about how I'm being seen and rewarded in whatever ways that is? And it's not the mentor who shared this with me. He said, if you want 2 out of 3. If you get 2 out of 3, then you lock in for another whatever it is. And every time I have looked around and considered something, it has been that math has been 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 is still winning here. And I talk a lot about this in interviews, and I feel really corny because it is very common. Folks will ask, why have you been at CollegeWise a long time? When I'm interviewing candidates, and I always say, because of the people. And then I say, this is so embarrassing because it's like a very self serving answer to say, oh, I'm a chief people officer, and our people are the best part of what's going on here. But that's been true since I got here. And frankly, when I met those first 4 people in the Irvine office, I was like, these are the coolest people I've ever met. I'll never get to hang out with them. My mom's like, you're cool too. They're going to love you. But it was that kind of like, these kids are so cool and smart. And I don't know if I can hang. Every time we go to hire, that is the energy for the folks that are, when a new class joins, the current college wisers go, oh my gosh, these folks are so cool. I would never get hired now. And I think that there's a lot of that, constantly feeling like they're people who make you smarter, who challenge you, who make you laugh, who like are bought in and invested. The work is hard. It's hard being a human on earth in 2025. And so it's hard no matter what, period. This is a capitalist society. Boo, tomato, tomato. So in that, can I do the work surrounded by people who bring me joy and who send me a funny GIF in the middle of the day, and who payroll is going to have, we're going to have a payroll issue. We're going to have an HR system issue. We're going to have a documentation thing. That stuff is going to happen no matter what. There's parts of the work that are annoying, but if the people who are around me make the rest of it feel really good, then I feel like that creates the balance. Every time I'm asked to hire, hey, this is the headcount we need, this is the headcount we need, I go, uh-oh, you guys, everybody cool's here. We already hired, look around. Everyone's brilliant and wonderful. They're all here. How could I possibly find 8 more people that are this wonderful? And then I get to go hire and I go, wow, look at the folks who are coming in. So that thing too of like, I am better for the folks who are coming in and have worked here 6 months The people part, I will never get over. I think the thing too about, well, I'll talk about layoffs. We've been really lucky not to have to do layoffs in any way. I think the toughest period for us as an organization in 2008, there was a big economic crash, and that happened after students had applied to college. And so, in between submitting applications in November and their decisions coming out in February, March, 529 savings were cut in half, da da da. That was a very scary time, I think, at work. But most recently during COVID, we had to furlough. We had done some hiring and had to furlough some folks. It was rough. It's like terrible to have to put folks in that position. I think we were really lucky in that we were able to bring them all back a few months later. I think CollegeWise always tries to operate in a people first kind of way. And that's also just a thing that you can say. Businesses obviously there are some things that are out of our control, but I think I'm very proud that when we have been in tough situations, the decision making has been people first, really, and taking care of folks. When I think about being an accidental HR lady and I think about being an HR lady anywhere else, as the HR lady, as the people person, you have to kind of stand behind any decision the team is making. And I feel lucky to have been really confident in those tough decisions, felt like they were always really thoughtful, and they felt like things I could stand behind. The layoff news is crazy. I see the LinkedIn headlines like everybody else, and those people teams have to also stand and deliver that news. And so I think for me, like how we handle stuff when things are really hard is the test of if I can continue to carry the flag for this play, like to preach what we're doing and continue to bring people in to do good work here.
That was really important to kind of lean in on because, like I said previously, and I don't want to speak too much for Nikki, so I'll let her chime in, right? Especially the younger generation. They graduated in a time of layoffs where that made headlines, which I'm assuming just helps prepare you for your career in a very, very different way. Comparatively, when I graduated, our parents were still with the same employer that they met their whole lives. So I had much more the assumption I was going to stay with the company I was with. That didn't end up being the case because I'm also influenced. But it is very different. Nikki, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Kind of how you graduated and your peers or, your friends?
Yeah, of course. I know we talked about this recently too, Sandra. So you've kind of heard me give this spiel, but I think for all of the recent grads, I specifically graduated high school in 2015, college in 2019. And I think the expectation was you go in, you do the steps that you're supposed to do, and you get out and you're going to be able to get a job. And I know people who are going above and beyond, getting internships, making all these great connections within these companies. And then they go into the job market and they suddenly find themselves for a year not being able to get a job because all of these entry level jobs are just getting wiped out with the uptick of AI, and just the job market as a whole right now is not the best to enter into. So I think that's just leading to a lot of discontent. It reflects in why people are job hopping. I think there's a lot of hesitation. I think previously with your jobs, you kind of approach it in the sense of like, my employer is always going to have my back. And I think a lot of people are going into the job market and they're realizing, oh, I have to prioritize myself. It's just me out here fighting to just be employed and be happy in the job that I'm in. So very interesting time to be entering the job market, to say the least.
Yeah, I think the promise has changed and the cost of college has gone up, and your ability to get a job that is balanced out quickly has not gone up in accordance. I think that's like really frustrating. And that's so hard, I think, to send young people out into the world like that. And then you learn how to react. So you are born as a graduate into this job market I've got a student who I worked with a while ago who's doing great, but went through 3 rounds of layoffs at Oracle. And that is a company that they'll bring you back and let you go and bring you back and let you go. And that, I think, that trains you how to treat an organization. And I cannot blame people who feel I have been really lucky to like have great support and have been able to grow and all that. I think I got lucky in some ways. And also, I cannot blame folks for feeling like work is not going to love you back. Work is not your family. Work is not and that's true. I used to use that language way more and I've removed it from my life. But I think that you do have to take care of yourself. I want folks to give notice. I want to be thoughtful and I want to be able to cheerlead you. And I also know that we work in a world where folks are having a job offer rescinded after they've given notice to their current role. And so I think that the job hopping or sometimes the like willingness to bail on this offer because this offer came through or whatever is a symptom of the market we've put people in. This is not everything is a direct line to college, but the rules of college admissions have changed in the same way. Colleges have changed the rules about early decision, so students have to act differently. I don't love the behavior that this has encouraged, but it's a symptom of the market. Your only choice to take care of yourself is to keep an eye out and have and be looking for a place that is going to take care of you. I think that we try really hard. I want folks to be able to be a lifer here. And you're not going to be, and that's totally fine, but to create the space for that to exist or for you to grow into whatever the next thing is. And I think that requires a lot of comfort with discomfort to like be open about people grow and sometimes you grow out. Like for us to talk about it transparently, it requires sometimes like just having uncomfortable conversations. But I think then we talk a lot about how do we build loyalty, but how do we keep folks engaged and continuing to get that what they need from work with what I'm able to do. I can't send a massage therapist to your house on Thursdays. There are things I can't do, but in the space that I can, how can we take care of folks and continue to give them what they need from work? And also really watch the line of what is work's job right now. We talk about mental health, we talk about all these things. People are carrying so much. And what is your work's job to take care of you? What is our job in terms of keeping employees supported and engaged? What does that look like? And it looks different everywhere and the tools are different everywhere. But I think that, okay, with what we have available to us, with our budget and with our people, and with what our people want and need, what can the thing be that we do? So it looks different. I don't have like great loyalty initiatives. That would be great. But I think I want this to continue to be a place people feel good to show up, people feel good to work with each other, and they feel good about the work they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's very special. Even at Bets, we haven't been around for 18 years, but we've been around for a long time. Some of our recruiters have been here for over a decade, or 9 years, 8 years. Like our average tenure is 5 years plus for the recruiters, which is unheard of. So, I mean, we've got some great kind of bonuses and incentives for people to stick around. Like the longer you're here, kind of the more things you receive, which I think is part of the reason. Unfortunately, we have had layoffs, which has caused some friction and some, I would say more problems, not problems necessarily, but definitely discontent for people to kind of accept it because people have been here for so long. And I think on average, Bets has done a really good job. And we obviously see it a lot with a lot of our clients who go through this and we place talent there. And we hear from them whether or not they're happy with the company culture. I think that's a big one. And I understand why people might be flighty or job hoppy, right? Because what I said was, I understand people wanting to use the phrase like family within a place of employment because you've been together for so long. You've gone through so much together. And, whether it's like giving birth, birthdays and work anniversaries and maybe deaths, sometimes you see your colleagues more, or often you see your colleagues more than your friends outside of work that you've had for maybe even longer. But at the end of the day, you do have to look out for yourself. And I do understand some people are more hoppy, and I know some of our recruiters don't love it. But you, as a chief people officer, are responsible for bringing in people who will help with the company culture. When you see that someone has job hopped, is that a red flag for you? Is it a conversation you're going to have? How do you deal with that?
I think that it probably was a red flag for me years ago. And I think that I have learned a whole lot more and the market has changed. It is not a fair expectation to set for folks. And I think context matters. So for me, I do really want to have the conversation. If your experience is aligned, I want to have the conversation to understand. Sometimes that is a really compelling, here are the things I learned and the leap I took. What I'm curious about is if you've got the skills to come in and make an impact here, and if you're going to be invested in our community. And that can happen even if you have folks who have job and then settle in and find their kind of professional home here. I love, but I think you've got to understand the context. I think it is really just like bad practice in this market to have anything to say about a job hopper for their reasons or because of what the company did. We've got acquisitions, we've got mergers, we've got things shuttering in a day and then opening back up. And then this, like, I want to know, I want to hire good people who are talented and can do good work. And I want to get out of their way. All of your exes before me, who cares? If you're going to come in here and do great work, I'm thrilled. But I think it is understanding the story. And that's, which I think is true anyway in our hiring process, but understand like who this person is. How do we get here?
So what do you look for, right? Because obviously I know you work with Beth, but what do you tell the recruiters or what do you look for when you personally receive CVs because you can't have conversations with everyone. There's so many people looking for jobs right now. What makes you say, I'll talk to that person?
So I think I've got a couple different buckets. The two biggest buckets that I hire for are our college counselors and then our sales teams. And we work closely with you guys on that, obviously. I think that in either one of those, part of the conversation is about how you approach the process. Sales in particular. I'll out myself right here. When CollegeWise first had the conversation about adding, we should have a sales team, I was like, absolutely not. That is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. No way. I was so sure that the counselors can handle this. They're so close to the families. They blah, 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 blah. I am so wrong about that. I say it all the time. I was wrong. But I think what Kevin, our founder, said in the meeting where he first talked about this is what would a sales team look like if it was CollegeWise? We went back to like, what are the principles of what a great college counselor does? And they build trust. They have great relationships with these families, and the families trust them to tell their friends. Kevin said, what would it look like if we had a sales team that was so great that families would refer their friends to their program advisor, what we call our inside sales folks? What would that look like? What would a salesperson look like who took care of a family and approached this like emotional and intense process with their, like, Sandra, you're already thinking about this with your 5-year-old, the level of anxiety you're going to bring to me when you call when you're 16. When he's 16, what would a sales team look like who could do that? And so that's kind of where we started. And it became about empathy, about understanding education and like this approach with family. So then identifying, you can have really great sales experience. You can close 100,000%, 50 billion calls a month, 1 billion% over target. But if you can't connect with a nervous mom who's worried about her kid who doesn't know what he's going to do next, it doesn't matter. If you cannot have that moment where you can sit with an anxious aunt and go like, I'm so glad you called. We got this. This is going to be okay. It doesn't matter what you close. I think too, for us, CollegeWise is not for everybody. Everybody does not need a college counseling package. Thousands of kids apply to college without us every year. I applied to college without us. But for the right family, this can be a game changer. And so in that process, also looking for folks who it's not just ABC always be closing. That's not how we operate. Unhappy families, not good at it, doesn't help anybody. And so really being intentional and thoughtful about the humans in the process. So I think that it's like, yes, you've got to have sales skills, but that empathy, being able to, one, talk about the education process, but also help families feel like, okay, we've got our feet under us in this process that feels only chaotic. So that thing, it's figuring out like the human part of this, I think is the biggest piece for our sales folks. I will say our recruiters are so patient in me explaining this like feeling, but I want to be able to trust that my best friend calls to get help with her student. I'm like, yes, you can talk to Jackie, you can talk to Nikki, you can talk to Dina, you can talk to Michael, you can talk. Absolutely. These are folks I trust with families who are stressed and worried. That's the sale is secondary to showing up and hearing this family out.
That's really beautiful. Make me laugh. You saw that probably. I was laughing because the amount of colleagues in sales I've had who had ABC always be closing on their walls is so funny. So like they would not be a good fit for CollegeWise.
No, I think that selling just to sell, and we're not selling a product, it's a process. And I'm also not selling that at the end you're getting into Harvard. That's not a promise I can make. And so it's a very different sales process. And we have a magical team of unicorns, sorry to everybody who I didn't name, who talk to families day in and day out and help them like find some calm in this insanity.
No, I understand because obviously what we do is very different, but in a similar way, like replacing talent at companies. And they have to be the right person at the right company. Our recruiter can't just push them through and be like, well, we did it in time. I was like, no, these are real humans and this is their livelihood.
Yeah.
And hopefully a place they want to be there. Yeah.
I want them to be successful here. So that thing of like somebody who is not interested in a supportive sales team culture, you don't want to be here. If you are fighting for number one, I love that for you and you will be wealthy in your life. But that is not how we work. Dina had a sore throat yesterday at who can jump on, and folks are, I got your back. I got you. That support, that is part of it. And there are folks who that's not a good fit. So I will shout out the Bets team for helping us really like pull apart and kind of figure out how to articulate what that is. Yes, the sales stuff is there and we've got to have that foundation, but also can you jump in with families at this really critical point?
Oh, it's beautiful. And I'm sure it's much easier for our team to place talent knowing that the company culture is good, because that's a question that gets asked a lot. They want to be happy too. And just because they've been burnt in the past, they'll think, same for when I think about where I want to work, Suddenly I'm like, have you guys done layoffs? How have you handled those? I want to make sure that any company I join treats their employees right. And company culture is such a big part of that. And even
Yeah.
we host virtual events. We meet with a bunch of executives who work in tech. And a conversation that's come up quite a bit is how do you build company culture? And we talk about different tools that we use. For example, something at Bets we love is Bonusly, where you can give employees for doing awesome things real money, and we're obsessed with it. And it's a nice little shout out with real financial benefits. And it's worked well for us. I know it's silly. Is there something that you guys do or something that you figured out over the past 18 years that's created that incredible culture that has made you stick around too?
I think part of one of the big shifts we had to make was when we moved from just being this little office in Irvine to that first kind of expansion. We opened offices in Westport and in Austin and Seattle. We were all over, and we had to scale from this, everybody being able to be at the same place and observe and sit in on meetings and watch me work, to scale one, the learning to counselors who weren't physically sitting with us, but also how do we make you feel a part of this culture? I think that we were very early adopters of the internet, not to brag, but we were doing Skype team meetings way before we were in pandemic work from home. So that early, kind of remote work of building those, spending time together and sitting around a table and comparing our student files, I think we started with these baby steps. Slack has been really huge for us. Slack as a virtual water cooler has been huge. And I think we've leaned into it and try to be a little goofy there. But that is just a little bit of always on. One of our new joiners last week, he said, I was in the town hall. I've never seen a chat in the town hall pop off like that. And I was like, oh, we were kind of quiet, actually. I was a little disappointed. So I think fostering that kind of energy and conversation, that is a part of it. I think too, we try to formally let folks steep in other parts of the organization. So we did the first version of this Kevin came up with, we did a talent tour of duty, and folks did an internal internship within the org as part of the talent team, this internal team. More recently, we have a huge team of counselors who interview counselors. So they run most of our interview process and are speaking most closely from they're in the weeds on the work and can talk day to day, but it means that our counselors are looking at our future hires and who's going to join them. And also it means that they have a champion before they get here. And so on that first day, I go, oh my gosh, so excited to introduce Kayla. And somebody's in that, Kayla, I remember you from your interview. I'm so glad you're here. So finding ways to plug people in and let them try on other stuff. Since we were little, I think we were really intentional about, we don't do a lot of that's not my job. As we get bigger, things get more siloed. Teams actually own things in their kind of different boundaries. But I think that still kind of everybody being willing to jump in and be thoughtful about how do we purchase, how do we bring counselors in here? They go, I care about what sales is saying. I want to be more involved. Great. How do we plug folks in those ways? And so whether it's formally tacking on different work into the work that you're doing, as a college counselor, you formally join the talent team, or you are formally working with sales or marketing or whatever. I think letting folks plug into different parts also keeps those tethers really strong, because they can see what's happening, the organization, not just their little corner. And I think we talk a lot about building trust in the information that we share with families and with educators. And so knowing what marketing is talking about and what sales is talking about and what's happening on the back end with finance and how ops is navigating this system challenge for a student to be able to include their pronouns in the student system, understanding all of that, I think feeds your work and your understanding of the organization and the idea that we're all rowing in the same direction.
No, I love that. And we're almost out of time. So I want to leave it with one final question. So you mentioned you're a first generation college graduate. And I think something a lot of especially women struggle with, and I can imagine especially as a first generation college graduate and being as successful as you are, being an executive at a really cool company that does well, imposter syndrome. How do you overcome it, right? And how do you help people, kind of your peers, overcome it as well, or openly talk about it? Because I think it's something a lot of us struggle with.
I think it is too. I talk a lot about this, and I cracked up maybe this is a few months ago. I saw a TikTok. Okay, we know where I'm getting my news, but it was Alona Mar being interviewed. And Alona Mar is an American rugby player. She's incredible and has done a whole lot talking about women in sports. But the interviewer said to her, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And she looked at that interviewer dead in her face and was like, I don't have that. I'm years old and I have never heard that. This is the thing I hear it in my head, but it was really very revolutionary for me to hear her go, yeah, I didn't get that. Whatever bucket that was, I didn't get that. That's not a thing that I have. And so it gave me a little bit of a reframing, but I think it's worth noting, I told you guys I wasn't going to do the podcast because why would you interview me? I have nothing to say. I think that I am still convinced I'm like a 19-year-old intern figuring this stuff out and somebody is going to figure it out. But I think also, as I have grown up a little bit in the work and as I have seen other folks, the idea that everybody has all the answers that I'm waiting for when I get to this level, or I am this role, or I am this thing, or I have this salary, or I have this, then it will all make sense, is fake. I hate to tell it. So that I think it has been really helpful for me to see other folks in leadership positions go, yeah, I wasn't sure about that. Or I'm guessing here, or this is the thing I'm learning about, because that has been my entire career has been me like guessing and figuring it out. So I think that understanding that other folks are also guessing and figuring it out, and nobody quite feels like they're grown up except for Alonamar, I think is really helpful for me. But I also think talking about it. So the women in my life, nobody cheerleads me or lifts me up more than the women in my life. I am a deep believer in shine theory. I am a deep believer and I lift up. There's not a limit to nice things I can say, to affirmations I can give, to the things that I can see to celebrate about the women in my life. And I think having that back is what calibrates the imposter syndrome for me. That being able to go, I got asked to do a podcast. I don't think I should do it. That's kind of silly. And my friend going, that you're dumb. Write them back right now. And that having other voices to mirror back to you. I talk a lot about sometimes the things you say, the critic you are to yourself is never how you would speak to people around you or people that you love. And I think having folks who mirror the right voice back to you, even if you can't always do it, is really life altering and affirming. So if you don't have a hype squad in your corner reminding you that you can do it on your imposter syndrome days, that is my biggest recommendation.
I love that. And I'm so glad you said yes. And I think you already know this, but the team that works with you literally said to us 10 times, you have to get Allison on the podcast. Besides that, she's hilarious. She is so clever. And honestly, this whole podcast has kind of felt like a warm hug for me. And I can't even express why or how, but I feel all warm and fuzzy and I feel understood and everything. I can only imagine how the team around you feels because...
See how we could help you feel with college counseling? This is how the admissions process is going to feel. This is how the process will feel. This has been great. I appreciate you guys so much in your approach to the process. I think part of the reason we ended up working with you all is because your approach to sales recruiting doesn't feel like everybody else is recruiting, and we're not recruiting everybody else's sales team. So I think it's so helpful to have translators advocate for us and help us find great ads to our team. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for coming on the podcast. And I think if people take anything away from this is get your own hype squad, and also TikTok is a great source for news.
Well, it can be. It can be. Of my legacy.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Beyond the Hire.